Silent scan.
Underground grid connected. Please insert your passkey. Passkey accepted. Downloading payload. Upcycled. Part 1. Experiences have a way of changing people. Sometimes they can uplift a person, motivate them to new heights. Other times, the experience is so devastating, it breaks them into pieces so small, the whole becomes unrecognizable. It seems to me the determining factor of the outcome is whether or not a person finds or loses themselves in the process. In my experience, the most profound wound is caused by the loss of self. I had never seen my brother smile like that before. A full smile with teeth and smile lines that lit up his blue eyes with so much joy, love, and happiness it brought tears to my eyes. He had always been the brooding type, who was more likely to be found with a frown shadowing his brow than so much as a grin on his face. It wasn't that he was an unhappy person, nor did he tend to lean towards melancholy. On the contrary, Hal was the kindest person anyone had ever met, and a rare listener that made anyone who spoke to him feel truly seen and heard. He had this intensity that came with his uncanny ability to be fully present in conversations. It was like a switch that he flicked on the moment anyone needed him. He would just turn, and those blue eyes would fall on you with unwavering attention and focus. He knew how to give people what they wanted, as well as what they needed, and he had gained a reputation in town for teaching those around him how to enjoy the simple pleasures in life. It was his extreme sensitivity that made him a gift to the lives of so many, and yet it was his sensitive nature that seemed to contribute to the many hours he would spend up in his head when he was alone. He'd made it a habit at a young age to sit with his feet propped up in a chair and an open book in his lap. For years and years, I thought he was just an avid reader. But eventually I found that was his way of remaining undisturbed without striking up worry for his well-being as he pondered and pondered away. He sat, sometimes for hours, in a stillness I grew to envy. I found him like that more times than I can count. Although I always wondered what he was thinking so intently about, I never drew up the courage to ask. There was something intimidating about a man with such deep intellect. I always got the impression that he might turn my entire world upside down just by posing a single question. I had no idea some questions were answered best without words. I knew he loved Sarah from the moment he laid eyes on her. We were taking a walk through town, enjoying one of the first warmer days of spring, when she walked by with an armful of flowers and a blue dress that was stained with dirt. Her brown hair had been a wild mess, and bits of soil clung to the edges of her hairline as if she had wiped her temple with the back of a garden hand. It had been the first and only time I hadn't had my brother's full and undivided attention. I'd asked his opinion on some everyday thing I can no longer remember, and the question had been, for the very first time, met with silence. I remember thinking he was simply contemplating an answer when I turned to find him preoccupied. "Hal?" I prompted, confused by this completely out-of-character response. He was so engrossed, not only was he paying me absolutely no mind, but he had stopped walking altogether, his gaze fixed. Coming to stand beside him, I looked to see what had his undivided attention, and it led my eyes to fix on Sarah. She continued on her way, oblivious to our staring, and disappeared through the glass door of a white brick building I had never been inside before. "Who is that?" he asked in utter fascination. I shrugged even though he wasn't looking at me. Like most places in Global Genesis, our town was small, so it never took long for word to spread about rare new arrivals. "I think her name is Sarah. She and her father are new in town. I think he works for Global..." But before I could finish my sentence, Hal was moving, beelining towards the little shop after her. "Hal? Hal!" Hal, I called, struggling to keep up with his long strides. Where are you? I bumped into someone and apologized before trotting to catch up with my older brother, who by now was only steps away from the door. I was about to protest when his hand shot forward and swung the glass door open. I fell silent as a bell chimed and we stepped inside. The shop smelled of fresh plants and damp soil. A maze of tables at all shapes and sizes was arranged about the room with a wide assortment of flowers and plants. Some were arranged in ornate bouquets, others were organized by group in little buckets and jars filled with water. Entire plants I had never seen before enamored me with their exotic colors, shapes, and shining leaves. Hal seemed just as stunned as I was, for he was standing with his mouth agape, his blue eyes scanning as they took in the unexpected view. "Hello," a bell of a voice said from the back of the room. The arrangement of flowers, pots, and plants at the front table was so thick it impaired our view. Hal remained silent and frozen. I nudged him with an elbow and mouthed for him to say hello. His eyes went wide and he shook his head. "Hello?" the voice said again, followed by the light sound of footfall. Hal blinked, as if just realizing where he was for the first time. His face contorted into panic as he grasped my hand and made to pull me towards the door. When I resisted, he shot a pleading look at me from over one shoulder. "Go say hi to her," I whispered. The footfall was closer now, and his gaze shifted behind me, behind the table that impaired his view of the woman that had transfixed him so suddenly and so completely just moments before. After everything, I think it was that moment that came to me most on late nights when sleep eluded me. Sometimes I found myself wondering what might have changed, if anything, if I had shoved Hal out the door that day instead of into the open aisle. Then again, I never could bring myself to do it, even in my own mind's eye. It never felt right to deprive him of the happiness that Sarah brought him, no matter how brief. The second Hal was out in the open, his body went rigid, and I knew he must be face to face with Sarah. His mouth was gaping, floundering for something to say. His hands must have been sweaty because he wiped them on the leg of his pants before he said in an unsteady voice, "Hi." "Hello," she replied in a pleasant voice. She must have given him an expectant or questioning look because he cleared his throat before speaking again. I'm Hal Jefferies. We live just up the road," he said, tossing a thumb over one shoulder. My sister saw your shop and she just had to come in." I shot him a glare from my hiding spot behind the table of flowers before straightening when I was met with Sarah's smiling face peering at me from around the edges of a nearest plant. I gave her an awkward smile and waved, stepping more out into the open. "Hi." "Yeah, I just love..." I looked around wildly and pointed to the plant beside me. "These." Something about the look on Sarah's face told me she wasn't entirely convinced, but she smiled politely and played along. "Peace lilies. Great houseplants if you're looking for reliable flowers. Were you looking to buy one?" Hal and I spoke at the same time. The problem was, I said no, and he said yes. Sarah looked between us. She giggled quietly, and Hal gave her an embarrassed grin. "What my sister means to say is, we want one, but neither of us is very good with plants, I'm afraid." Sarah's kind eyes looked between us. She cocked her head. "Well, I could come by once a week for a bit, teach you how to care for it," she offered, her gaze landing on Hal as the offer hung between them. That was the first time I saw it. That smile that was all teeth and smile lines, and filled my brother's eyes up with joy. "I'd like that. We would like that," he amended, gesturing between us. Sarah picked up the peace lily, shooting me a polite smile on her way before turning to hand it over to my brother. He took it gently, cradling it in one of his strong arms as if it were a delicate antique, which it might as well have been. Surely that thing had to be expensive. I did my best not to shoot a dirty look at the side of his head. "How much do we owe you?" Hal asked, and I groaned inwardly. Sarah smiled up at him and shook her head. "This one is on the house." Hal shifted on his feet. "Take it, I insist. Once you learn how to care for this one, you can make it up to me by becoming a regular at my store." Her smile broadened, and Hal let loose a chuckle. It was joyful and carefree. They held each other's gazes for a long moment before he nodded once. "You got it," he finally replied quietly. "When can I expect you?" Sarah's fingers fiddled idly with the apron of her dress. "Tomorrow?" she asked. My brother smiled warmly at her and nodded once. "Tomorrow." My brother's cabin sat on the corner lot across from mine. The light in his expression stayed on his face for the entire walk back. All he said about the encounter was, "She sure is something, isn't she?" To which I just nodded. I didn't have the heart to say anything that might make him think I was poking fun. He seemed happy in a way I'd never seen before. It was as if Sarah's presence had lit him up from the inside out. It was nice to see him so happy. I left Hal sitting in a chair on his front porch, staring at the peace lily he placed on the wooden railing. He sat there the rest of the day in that quiet, reverent way of his, a light grin tugging at the corners of his lip. He was still out there long after I returned home and late into the night. I checked on him one last time before bed, beginning to wonder if he would spend the whole night out there. But he was gone, the plant assumedly gone with him. The next day, my best friend Brandy came over. She and her husband were having trouble again. They had plans for starting a family, and like many other couples in town, they were encountering several obstacles in the way of conceiving. Looking to blow off some steam and focus on something else for a while, she had come over to enjoy some much-needed tea and girl time. We were sitting at my kitchen table when I suddenly got up to look out the window again. "Okay, that is the second time you have done that since I got here. What are you looking for?" she grilled, rising to look outside with me. I told her quickly about my brother's interaction yesterday with Sarah, and she stared at me with surprise. "Your brother, the most eligible bachelor in town, is in love with a woman he has never met?" she clarified in an excited tone. I nodded, grinning just as wide as she. Brandy hugged her arms to herself and quietly squealed while I shushed her. "Hush," I admonished. "I don't want to miss their interaction." We both ducked instinctively when Hal's door suddenly opened and he stepped out. He had clearly spent a lot of time getting ready for his date because he was wearing one of his best blue button-down shirts and his nice khaki pants. He had even freshly trimmed the stubble he already kept while manicured. Brandy let loose a low whistle. "Wow, your brother means business. He got himself all gussied up." I nodded, watching as he put the peace lily on the railing again and took a seat, looking effortlessly calm. It was only moments later when Sarah came walking up the path. She looked beautiful in a red flower print skirt, white blouse, and brown boots. She had a large bag slung over one shoulder and a tray of tiny plants in her hands. Brandy unlatched the window and I scowled at her. "What are you doing?" I whispered, and then wondered why I was whispering inside my own house. She giggled, holding a finger to her lips, and made for the window again. "What does it look like I'm snooping? We can't hear anything like this." I shook my head and relatched the window before she could slide it open. She thrust her lip out at me in a mock pout. "My brother deserves his privacy." Brandy's face sobered, but she nodded reluctantly. "Fine, I suppose you're right," she conceded. I grinned mischievously. "But," I added quickly, and her face perked up again as her gaze met mine, "I don't see anything wrong with checking in from time to time." A grin spread across her lips. She cocked her head at me and shot me a look out of the corner of her eye. "I like the way you think." Brandy and I passed the time sipping tea and playing chess. Every now and again, we peeked at Hal and Sarah through the window to find them smiling lovingly at each other, engrossed in conversation, while Sarah taught Hal everything she knew about the plants they were putting in various little pots. At sunset, my brother kissed Sarah for what Brandy and I assumed was the very first time. We both sighed a bit. It was one of those long and deep kisses, gentle, patient. My brother kissed Sarah like he wanted to take all the time in the world to do it. It was as if he didn't want to rush even a second of the moment that seemed so precious to him, and was willing to give it all the time it deserved to flourish and thrive naturally, to progress on its own. Sarah and Hal began spending every weekend together until their time apart became overshadowed by their time spent together. They were the talk of the town. People stopped to appreciate the patient way my brother expressed his love for Sarah and the ease in which she gave that love to him in return. I began to see that smile on his face more and more, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude seemed to light up his eyes. Sarah was my brother's perfect fit. She was taken with his intensity, but unbothered by his need for stillness or quiet. It was common to find her sitting in silence beside him, a book spread open between her hands. They both brought out the best in each other and treated each other with unwavering respect and understanding. Hal brought a sense of support and structure to Sarah's free-spirited ease, and Sarah brought a sense of adventure to Hal's life, encouraging him to live life by keeping to himself a little less. They became a beacon in the community and the love story that everyone talked about. It wasn't long after that my brother decided it was time to take their relationship to the next level. So he enlisted me to help, and we began plotting to find the perfect ring for his proposal. He settled on a simple but lovely gold band, dipping into the little savings he had to purchase it. When he popped the question, it was an immediate and resounding yes. The wedding was beautiful but simple. Of course, Sarah's love for plants meant there were stunning bouquets and an abundance of greenery for the ceremony, which were the fanciest items of the occasion. They got married down by the lake in their usual dress clothes and extended an open invitation to anyone who wanted to attend. Although Sarah's father, being a Global Genesis government employee, was less than thrilled with his daughter's choice to marry a simple man like my brother, he also couldn't deny the happiness my brother brought to Sarah's life. He gave his blessing and even gave a beautiful toast at the wedding. For 2 years, Hal and Sarah lived happy and healthy. Then Sarah began to complain about sharp and reoccurring headaches. It was a particularly hot summer, and although Hal expressed concerns, Sarah dismissed them with a promise to drink more water. Surely it was just a bit of dehydration. She was wrong. This is Blake C. Holloway. We hope you have enjoyed this production of Upcycled, Part 1 by Blake C. Holloway. This program was produced and directed by B. Holla Entertainment. Text copyright 2025 by Blake C. Holloway. Production copyright 2025 by B. Holla Entertainment. All rights reserved. This is a copyrighted work. Unauthorized copying or distribution is a crime. Transmission terminated.